I was told to stay quiet during the pitch, even though the deck was mine. I didn't react. Not visibly, anyway. Years in corporate had trained me well. Nod, smile, and say, of course, no matter what. It was a Monday morning at Cinevision Partners, pitch week. The entire floor was buzzing with pressure-charged air, the kind that makes your palms sweat, even if you're just walking to the printer. The lights in our open office flickered with anticipation. The coffee machine groaned, like it knew we were going to ask too much of it again, and I sat at my desk with my fourth revision of the Oris Global deck, glowing on the screen. I'd been working on it for 3 weekends straight. The strategic segmentation, the B2B lead, modeling, the multi-phase media rollout, it was all mine. Quietly, meticulously, completely mine. But now Derek Vaughan, our CEO, stood at the head of the strategy room, holding a printout of the very slides I'd designed, and told me with the same breezy charm he used to order, oat milk lattes, Julia Awesome. Formatting, I'll take it from here. My jaw twitched. Just barely stick around, though, he added without meeting my eyes. We might need you for follow-up data points if the client pushes translation. Cite quietly, look pleasant, and don't interrupt. He moved on. The rest of the room followed. The meeting broke without a single mention of who authored the analysis that could decide a $2.7 million contract. I walked back to my desk with that hollow, familiar weight in my chest. Claire, our project manager, peeked over her monitor as I returned. Let me guess. He's presenting it himself. I nodded. And I'm invited to stick around. Like parsley. She frowned. You're the reason we're even getting this meeting. Why do you let him do this? It was a question with too many answers. Because I'm not the loud one. Because he's the CEO. Because every time I've spoken up, I've been told I'm overthinking it. Because I've watched people less qualified get promoted just for showing up louder. Because it's easier to stay invisible than to get dismissed out loud. That afternoon, the executive team rehearsed in the glass conference room. I wasn't invited, but I sat outside pretending to work while watching Derek reword my insights into catchphrases that made my skin crawl. This isn't just a market opportunity, he said, pausing dramatically in front of slide 14, the one I'd spent 12 hours perfecting. This is a cultural pivot. I stared at the back of his head and wondered if he even understood what the slide said. The next morning was the pitch. Angela Rhodes, VP of Marketing at Oris Global, arrived at exactly 9:00 a.m. She wore a navy wool coat with a sharp collar, no jewelry, and that particular look women in power have when they've learnt not to explain themselves. I had read everything about her. She was legendary Harvard MBA, 2 decades in strategic branding, and known for killing a deal with one sentence if she sensed anything fake. She shook Derek's hand, nodded at the room, and took her seat. Her assistant sat beside her, opening a slim leather notebook. No laptops, no phones, just her eyes and the truth she expected to hear. I sat in the back corner of the room, 2 chairs from the exit, not part of the meeting, not technically, just there in case numbers come up. Derek started strong as he always did. He could make a blank slide sound like a revolution. He talked tone vision, market vibes, and Angela listened, politely, blankly, until we reached slide 14. The slide with the behavioral segmentation, the one I'd rewritten 3 times after 11:00 p.m., the one with the subtle but game-changing insight about Oris's shifting buyer base. Angela leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. She tilted her head just slightly, then glanced sideways at her assistant, who gave a small, unreadable nod. She took a pen from her coat pocket and scribbled something in her notebook. Derek didn't notice. He'd already moved on to slide 15, talking about momentum frameworks. When it ended, there was a murmur of thanks and some awkward clapping. Angela stood, smoothed her coat, and said simply, "We'll be in touch." And that was it. The biggest pitch of the quarter, wrapped in 15 minutes of polished words and polite indifference. Back at my desk, I stared blankly at my inbox. Derek strutted down the hall, clapping backs and tossing compliments like rice at a wedding. Claire stopped by with a lukewarm smile. "Well, nothing, just..." "Same," She placed a hand on my shoulder. I wish it were different. I did too. Then at 3:17 p.m. it changed. I refreshed my inbox and there it was. Subject slide 14. Follow-up from Angela Rhodes to J. Tran at Cinevision. Julia. I assume you're the analyst behind slide 14. I'd like to speak directly with you. Are you available for a private call tomorrow morning? Angela. My heart stopped. Claire appeared again, her eyes catching the frozen look on my face. Bad news. I turned my monitor so she could read the screen. She blinked twice, then smiled like she hadn't in weeks, Julia, she whispered. She saw you. I looked at the screen again, rereading the message. Angela Rhodes. The one person who mattered, and she wasn't asking for Derek, she was asking for me. After reading Angela's email a dozen times, I still wasn't sure if it was real. I even hovered over the from field to check the address, convinced it might be a prank. But there it was, Angela Rhodes, Boris, Global Com, clear, clean, direct. Just like her. Claire insisted I respond that same night. Don't overthink it, she said, handing me a cup of peppermint tea from the break room. Just confirm the call. Be ready. You've been ready for years. I typed and retyped my reply 4 times before settling on. Dear Ms. Rhodes, I appreciate your message. I'm available at 10:00 a.m. tomorrow and would be honored to speak with you directly. Best regards, Julia Tran, simple controlled. My fingers shook anyway when I hit send. The next morning, I came in an hour early. I couldn't risk a bad connection at home or a barking dog, or the sound of the neighbor's leaf blower. I chose a quiet corner conference room with frosted glass walls and a broken thermostat that no one used anymore. Perfect, Angela called on the dot. Her voice was clear, calm, and somehow sharper, without being cold. Julia, she said, I appreciate you taking this. Of course, I said, trying to keep my tone even. There was a pause. Then I have a very simple question. Why did your CEO present your work without credit? I hesitated. My mouth opened and closed, once the way it always did when I tried to walk the line between honesty and diplomacy. I took a breath. That happens sometimes, I've gotten used to it. Angela didn't respond for a long beat, then you shouldn't have to. Her words were matter-of-fact, not comforting, which oddly made them land harder. I've worked with consulting firms for 25 years, she continued. I can smell when something doesn't match. Derek's language didn't line up with the clarity of slide 14. So I looked into the metadata of the file. Your name was all over it. I didn't know what to say to that. My throat tightened. Someone had actually checked. I want to hear the strategy from your mouth, not his, she said. Represent it to me. Clean slate. You have 48 hours. Wait, I blinked. You want me to do the pitch, yes, solo. If it's truly yours, I want to hear it in your voice. Can you be ready by Thursday morning? I paused. Yes. Angela's tone didn't shift, but I swore I could hear approval in her silence. Good. Don't water it down. Just tell the truth. Then the line went dead. I sat there stunned, staring at the call-ended screen, like it might disappear, and take the opportunity with it. 48 hours. Just me. No, Derek. No buffer. Just my work and my voice. I gathered my things slowly and walked back to my desk. Claire was already waiting, eyes wide. Well, she whispered. I sat. She wants me to present the strategy myself. Full deck Thursday. Claire's jaw dropped. That's amazing, Julia. This is your shot. I know, I said quietly. That's what terrifies me. By midday, the news had started to trickle. Not officially. There was no all-hands announcement, but emails started pinging. Slack threads got quiet when I entered. Derek hadn't said a word. He walked by my desk once, phone pressed to his ear, jaw clenched. He didn't look at me. Claire leaned in. You think he knows, he has to, around 3:00 p.m. I received a meeting invite, forwarded from Angela's office. Subject, Oris follow-up presentation, Julia Tran. Attendees, Angela Rhodes. 3 Oris directors, Julia Tran. No. Derek. I stared at the attendee list for a long time. That night, I stayed late. The cleaning crew vacuumed around me. The city outside the windows lit up one window at a time. I pulled up the old pitch deck and opened a new one beside it. And for the first time in a long time, I rewrote it for me. No flashy transitions, no meaningless buzzwords, just data clarity, logic, and the real insight behind why Oris's buyer base was shifting faster than their messaging. By midnight, I'd only reached slide 11. Claire returned with 2 coffees and a bag of almonds. She stayed without asking. She always did. Remember, she said gently, they asked for you, not what you think they want you to be. I nodded, but part of me still didn't believe it. As I worked through slide 14 again, refining the segmentation chart, I remembered the first time I realized I had an eye for strategy. It was during a college internship. I noticed a pattern in customer churn data and casually mentioned it during lunch. The VP paused, pulled me into her office, and asked for more. That was the moment I fell in love with the feeling, when something I noticed made a room go quiet. I hadn't felt it in years. At 1:30 a.m., I shut my laptop and stretched. Claire had dozed off in the corner with her jacket as a pillow. I pulled out my phone and typed a single sentence into notes. When you've been invisible long enough, being seen feels like exposure until you realize it's freedom. I wasn't just preparing a presentation. I was preparing to step out of the corner I had been pushed into for years. And this time I was walking to the front of the room on my own. I arrived at the office before sunrise. The building was still dark, the city just a silhouette outside the windows. No buzzing fluorescent lights. No voices. Just the hush of potential. For once, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. Claire had left a sticky note on my desk the night before. It read, "It's not about proving anything. It's about owning what's already yours." I smiled when I saw it, then opened my laptop and got to work. I didn't reuse Derek's version of the pitch. I didn't even copy my original deck. I built it all from scratch, slide by slide, word by word. Every point crafted with clarity, not flash. Every insight rooted in what Oris really needed, not what we thought would impress them. I worked straight through lunch. When Joe, one of our new analysts, passed by and saw me buried in mock-ups, he paused. "You okay, Julia?" he asked. I nodded. "Just rewriting history." He blinked. "You're doing the Oris follow-up, right?" I froze. "How do you know?" He shrugged. "Everyone does. It's the only thing anyone's whispering about." I turned back to the screen, then let them whisper. By late afternoon, the final deck was taking shape. It wasn't flashy, but it was solid, subtle, confident, like I wanted to be. Claire returned with takeout and forced me to eat half a salad while she walked through my slides with a red pen. "Slide 5 needs a stronger bridge," she said. "You go from data to conclusion too fast." I adjusted it. She nodded. "And slide 14. It's perfect, it was, but I still reread it 5 times. At 10:00 p.m., we dimmed the lights and ran the full presentation. I stood at the head of an empty room, talking to 4 chairs and one supportive project manager with a Diet Coke in hand. I'd rehearsed presentations before, but never like this. Never knowing that the room I'd speak to next wouldn't have Derek filtering my words. That I would be the voice, the only voice. We wrapped past midnight. Claire gave me a hug at the elevator and whispered, "Whatever happens tomorrow, it's already a win." I nodded, but I couldn't sleep. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining everything that could go wrong. My voice cracking, my slides freezing, Angela changing her mind. Derek storming in mid-call, demanding credit. I saw it all. And then I imagined what could go right. Me standing steady, Angela nodding once, just enough to say, "You belong here." The next morning, I arrived an hour early again. Same forgotten conference room, same broken thermostat. At 8:59, the Zoom window blinked. Then Angela appeared alone, composed, no small talk. "Whenever you're ready," she said. I cleared my throat. clicked share screen and began. The first slide opened with a clean title, Understanding Oris's Buyer Evolution. Julia Tran. Strategic Analyst. Angela's eyebrows lifted, subtle but noticeable. I spoke evenly. No theatrics, just story logic data. Slide 3. The market's behavioral shifts. Slide 5. Pain points in Oris's current messaging. Slide 9. A phased approach to repositioning by buyer segment. By the time I reached slide 14, the heart of the strategy, I felt the shift. Angela leaned forward. She didn't take notes. She just watched. I explained the segmentation model, how Oris's emerging buyer segment was no longer responding to traditional corporate tone, how trust was being built through transparency, not control, how their campaigns had to reflect listening, not dominance. Silence followed. Angela finally said, "This wasn't in the original presentation." I met her gaze. "That's because it wasn't presented by me." She nodded slowly. I continued to the final slide, then muted myself, hands trembling under the table. Angela unmuted. "I've sat through hundreds of agency pitches. This one made me sit up." My breath caught. She continued, "You're not just a strategist, you're a translator. You listen between the numbers." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Angela leaned back. "I'm moving forward with your plan, and I want you as my point of contact from now on." I blinked. "Just me, just you." She closed her notebook. "Send me your personal direct line. I'll have my team coordinate from here." And just like that call ended, I sat there alone, blinking at the meeting ended by host screen. The silence was deafening. I stood up slowly, stepped out into the hallway, and found Claire waiting. She raised her eyebrows. I whispered, "She wants me, just me." Claire grinned. "Well, damn, we didn't celebrate, not yet." But she walked beside me to the break room, poured 2 coffees, and said, "You realize you just rewrote your job description, right?" I nodded. But I didn't feel proud yet. I felt visible. And that was newer than any promotion. Thursday morning arrived, draped in fog and nerves. The air was cold, not just outside, but in the office, too quiet, clinical, filled with tension that clung to the walls like condensation. No one talked much that day. I passed colleagues in the hallway, and all I got were brief nods, tight smiles, and the kind of silence that says we know something is happening, we just don't know how it ends. I took the elevator up to the top floor alone. Normally, I'd have my laptop bag in one hand and coffee in the other, but today my hands were free and strangely steady. Claire met me outside the boardroom and handed me a large to-go cup. "Chai extra ginger," she said. "You're going to knock it out of the park." I gave her a grateful smile. I haven't even stepped onto the field yet. She leaned closer and whispered, "Trust me, everyone's already watching." Inside the executive boardroom was prepared like a set for a high-stakes play. The long, polished table gleamed under the recessed lighting. At one end sat 3 senior executives from Oris Global, flipping through printed slide decks. One of them wore glasses on the tip of her nose and took notes with a mechanical pencil underlining as she went. Another sat perfectly upright, arms crossed, giving nothing away. At the center, calm and statuesque, was Angela Rhodes. She stood facing the windows, hands folded behind her back, watching the snow drift outside like it had something to say. When the door clicked behind me, she turned and gave me a single nod. "Julia," she said, "good to see you again." I walked to her and shook her hand, firm, grip-dry palm, clear eyes. She didn't smile, but I didn't need her to. She didn't come for charm. She came for clarity. A few seconds later, a Derek strode into the room, late by only a minute, but loud by presence. His cologne hit first, then the crisp click of leather shoes, and his signature overconfident smile. "Angela," he said warmly, stepping forward with an extended hand. She turned to him with a professional coolness. "Derek." She shook his hand, then dropped it immediately. She didn't introduce her team. She didn't ask about ours. She didn't even look around to check if anyone was missing. She walked to her seat, placed her notebook on the table, and said, "Let's begin." Everyone turned toward me. I walked to the presenter's screen, connected my laptop with a deep breath, and began sharing the updated pitch deck. For a brief second, the screen blinked black. My heart dropped. Then it flickered to life. The first slide appeared. Understanding Oris's Buyer Evolution. Strategy. Briefing by Julia Tran. I cleared my throat and began. Thank you all for coming today. I'll be walking you through a refined strategy that builds upon the original proposal with particular emphasis on behavioral segmentation and messaging calibration in response to shifting buyer priorities. No fluff, no metaphors, just substance. As I moved from slide 2 to slide 5, I noticed heads nodding. The executive with his glasses was underlining again, but now she was circling phrases. The man with crossed arms leaned slightly forward by slide 6. When I arrived at slide 9, messaging, consistency by buyer generation, I paused and looked directly at Angela. This is where most campaigns fail, not in content creation, but in context, misalignment. Gen Z is interpreting your language as hierarchical. Millennials are disengaged, and your existing loyalists are aging out. That's a conversation Oris needs to lead, not react to. Angela said nothing. She simply watched. Then came slide 14. The room went still. This, I said. Clicking the remote is the insight that reframes the entire strategy. Oris isn't losing clients. You're losing resonance. The trust gap is not a result of pricing or product. It's language, tone, and expectation. Your audience no longer buys what you sell. They buy what they believe you stand for. The slide behind me showed a segmented chart, 3 rings that faded in gradient tones, mapping emotional drivers across customer tiers. No jargon, no gimmicks, just truth. Angela leaned in slightly, her hands folded under her chin. The woman with the pencil whispered something to her colleague. He nodded. That's when Derek tried to step in. Of course, he said, clearing his throat. Julia's insights here stem from the strategic vision we've been refining over the last few quarters. Angela held up a hand. Derek, she said softly but firmly, you've spoken. Now I'd like to listen. The silence that followed was the kind that could cut glass. I continued through the final 4 slides, each one focused, precise, and measured. When I reached the last one, I didn't end with a motivational quote or a buzzword. Just this: my recommendation is that Oris move forward with a campaign centered not around product innovation, but perception alignment. Because if the audience doesn't feel seen, they won't listen, no matter how good your message is. I let the silence breathe. Angela closed her notebook slowly. That was the first time in 3 months someone has told me something I didn't already know, she said. My lungs tightened. She turned to her team. This is what we move forward with. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. So, next steps in terms of project ownership. Angela looked straight at me. Julia, I'd like you to be the lead on this engagement, direct contact. Weekly syncs with me, Derek blinked. Of course, we can arrange internal transitions. There's no need, she said coolly. This is a client mandate. Then she stood and gathered her things. I'll expect the rollout outline by end of day. Thank you for your time. She walked to the door, nodded briefly to me and left. Her team followed silently. The room stayed frozen for another 5 seconds. Then the woman with the glasses turned to me and said, Great job. We'll be in touch this afternoon. When they were gone, the energy collapsed, like a vacuum had been opened. The oxygen was back, but different now. Real Claire came in through the side door with a coffee refill and a grin she didn't bother to hide. Was it just me, she whispered, or did the temperature drop 10 degrees? When she cut Derek off, I exhaled. It wasn't just you. Derek stayed seated, eyes on the table. His mouth opened once, then closed. Finally, he muttered, We'll need to regroup. I turned to him, measured. I'm happy to provide a handoff summary, I said evenly. If needed. He looked up, surprised at the sharpness in my tone, but I was calm, clear. And I didn't flinch. I held his gaze until he blinked away. In that moment, I realized something simple and startling. He might still have the title, but the room, the client, the confidence. They were mine now. The day after the pitch didn't begin with trumpets or applause. It began like any other quiet elevator ride, badge swipe footsteps on thin carpet, but something in the air had shifted. People didn't look through me anymore. They looked at me not with pity, not with curiosity, with recognition. Claire was already at her desk, 2 coffees in hand. She lifted one and grinned. I figured you'd come in early. Couldn't sleep either. I was too awake, I said, still stunned by the clarity of the previous day. We walked to the break room together, and as we passed the row of glass offices, something else happened. People moved aside, not dramatically, not performatively, but with quiet acknowledgement, like something unspoken had been decided, and no one wanted to be the last to realize it. When I sat down at my desk, I found a single envelope taped to my monitor. My name handwritten. No logo, no stamp. Inside was a note. Leadership doesn't need titles, it just needs truth. Thank you for saying what mattered. A colleague. No signature, I didn't need one. That morning, HR called me in for a quick chat. Nothing formal, just a conversation about growth. I walked in and found 2 people waiting, the head of talent development, and surprisingly the CFO. We'd like to create a new position, they said, focused on strategic insight and direct client consulting. A hybrid between what you're doing now and what the agency should have built around you long ago. I sat stunned. You won the Oris Trust, the CFO added. Not Derek, not Cinevision. You, and we want to keep you. They offered me the title, Director of Strategic Insight. The title itself didn't shake me, but the implications did. I wouldn't just be building decks anymore. I'd be shaping narratives before they were even slides, and for the first time I wouldn't have to fight to speak. I'd be asked. I accepted, of course, but not before asking one thing. I want the right to bring my team. And I want Claire. The CFO smiled smart. Back at my desk, I forwarded the Oris rollout plan to Angela as promised. Within minutes, she replied, "Perfect. Your clarity continues to impress. Let's schedule Monday's sync. P.S. Thank you for cutting through the noise. It wasn't flowery. It didn't need to be. It was direct, clear. Just like her." That afternoon, Claire and I took an overdue walk around the block. Snow had softened the edges of the sidewalk. Holiday lights blinked half-heartedly in a window across the street. "You know, he's fuming, right?" she said casually. "Derek?" She nodded. "Word is the board is reviewing internal alignment. Which is polite char speak for, how the hell did you lose Oris?" I sighed. I don't want to gloat. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Then don't, but you are allowed to exhale." We stopped at the corner. A gust of wind kicked snow into our faces, and for a second we just stood there, 2 women who'd spent years making space for others, finally stepping into our own. I keep thinking about the first time I presented something I said. Years ago, the VP at the time said, "Good job, but let someone more senior deliver it next time." And I never questioned that Claire looked at me. Until now. Back at the office, I found Joe, our youngest analyst, hovering awkwardly near my desk. He'd always been polite, but quiet around me. Now he looked like he had something to say. "Can I ask you something?" he blurted. "Sure, that deck. Slide 14. How did you know? I mean the insight." I paused, because I stopped trying to sound smart and started listening to the data. He nodded slowly. "Do you think maybe sometime you could show me how you see it?" I smiled. Of course. The rest of the day unfolded gently. No fanfare, no mass emails. But I could feel the shift. Coworkers paused a beat longer when I passed. Emails landed in my inbox asking for my input, not just my formatting. At 4:45 p.m., as the sky dimmed and the office lights grew warmer, Derek walked past. We locked eyes briefly. He nodded once. Not angry, not even forced. Resigned. He knew so did I. At 5:00 p.m., Claire dropped by with her coat already on drink. "Tonight," she asked, not to celebrate, just to mark it. I nodded. 1. As I packed up, I noticed the old sticky note still stuck on my monitor. It's not about proving anything. It's about owning what's already yours. I left it there, because now it finally felt true. It was the last Friday before the holiday break. The office was quieter than usual, not from stress, but from a kind of peace I hadn't heard in years. A light snow had started to fall again, dusting the city outside in white, and someone on the floor had dared to put on a soft jazz Christmas playlist. A small miracle. I arrived at my desk and paused. Everything looked the same, monitor plant mug with a chipped handle, but I didn't feel the same. A week had passed since the Oris meeting. One quiet, steady week of transition. I hadn't taken over Derek's job. I hadn't been given a throne, but in the eyes of the team, something had changed. They no longer asked if I knew what I was doing. They now asked how I knew. That morning, Claire dropped off a slim envelope with a grin. From Angela, she whispered. Inside was a cream-colored card with her elegant handwriting. Julia. Thank you for reminding us that strategy doesn't need to sparkle. It needs to resonate. Let your voice stay loud even when the room grows quiet again. Angela. I folded it slowly and placed it in the top drawer of my desk, next to a worn-out flash drive and an old name tag from my intern days. A little before noon, I headed to the small internal studio for a video call with Oris. It was a short check-in before the holidays. Angela, her senior brand officer, and 2 product leads. They logged in cheerful and alert. We ran through milestones, updated delivery timelines, and outlined January priorities. Near the end, Angela said, "We'll finalize the next steps after New Year's. But I'll say this now, Julia. You've restored something. We thought we lost. What's that?" I asked. She smiled faintly, faith in the people behind the slides. I nodded, swallowing the sudden tightness in my throat. When the call ended, I didn't rush back to my desk. Instead, I stood near the window for a while watching the snow thicken. Across the street, a bakery I used to visit had put up a hand-painted sign. Warmth is not seasonal. It made me smile. That afternoon, Joe knocked on the wall of my cubicle with a small notepad in hand. "Got a second?" I waved him in. He pulled up a chair, nervous. "I've been thinking about what you said, about listening to the data, and also about how long it took for anyone to listen to you." I looked at him gently. "Sometimes the hardest part isn't doing the work. It's waiting to be seen." He nodded. "I hope it doesn't take me as long." I smiled. "Maybe it won't, but if it does, you'll be ready." Around 3:00 p.m., Claire brought in hot cocoa, real whipped cream, not the powdered stuff. She placed a mug on my desk and leaned against the divider. "You realize you haven't said yes to a party invite all year," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "There was a party invite." "There's always a party invite," she laughed, "but this one's just drinks on the 12th floor. No dress code." "Just relief," I laughed. "I'll think about it." She didn't press at 4:30. I opened a blank Word document. I didn't know why. Just instinct. I stared at the blinking cursor and typed. I used to whisper my ideas. Now they echo in rooms I never thought I'd enter. Then I closed the file and smiled. Before heading out, I gathered my things. Slowly, scarf coat, laptop. At the last second, I reached for the grey blazer hanging on my chair. The one I wore when I faced Angela. The one I'd worn for 6 years, hoping someone would notice. I folded it carefully and placed it into my bag. Not because I was done with it, but because it no longer defined me. I stepped into the hallway just as the first floor of lights dimmed. The office buzz had settled to a hum. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear someone humming along to Nat King Cole. I passed Derek's office, dark blinds drawn. HR hadn't confirmed his status yet, but the writing was on the glass. And honestly, I didn't need to know. He could be gone tomorrow or still be CEO next month. It didn't matter because power and title was never what I needed. I just needed the room. Now I had it. Claire joined me at the elevator, her cheeks flushed from laughter and sugar. We rode down in silence, and just before the doors opened, she said, "So what now?" I thought for a second. Now I said, "I build my own table." We stepped into the snowy lobby together, and this time, I didn't wait for permission to lead the way. In every workplace, there are people whose voices go unheard, not because they lack talent, but because they don't shout. This story reminds us that true value doesn't always sparkle in the spotlight. Sometimes it's tucked quietly, behind the slides, waiting for the right person to notice. When someone finally does, it can change everything. Never underestimate the quiet ones. And if you're the quiet one, don't give up. Keep building, keep showing up. Eventually, the right room will hear you. And when it does, make sure you speak with the strength you've been holding in all along.